Parshas Yitro begins by Yishma Yitro Kohen Midjan Chosein Moshe Eis Kosha Okem Moshe Yisrael Amo Ki Hotzi Hashem Es Yisrael MiMitzrayim. And Parshas Yitro begins with the famous proclamation of Yitro hearing with all the miracles that happened to the Jewish people, that God took them out of Mitzrayim. So the famous Rashi quotes, what do you mean by Yishma Yitro? But this doesn't tell me what he heard. Ma Shmua Shama Baba. What caused him to come and join the Jewish people? So Rashi writes, Kriyas Yamsuf, the great miracles of the Red Sea, U'machamas Amalek, and Machamas Amalek. So the commentators are bothered. Why wasn't Kriyas Yamsuf enough? All the tremendous miracles we talk about at the Haggadah, the miracles that the Yamsuf put to shame the miracles in Egypt, and all the different levels, all the different nisim that happened. So why wasn't it enough that Kriyas Yamsuf brought Yisro? Why did he also have to hear about what happened to Amalek? So the Mefarshim explain is because if he just would have, there are different laws of Geirus. Here Yitro was converting to Judaism. In fact, Yitro was the ultimate convert, because the Medrash says he tried out all religions and he came to Judaism. So we all believe we have the right religion, but it's not like we tried all the religions. But Yitro actually went to all the religions and he came back. So Yitro was converting. So we know the different halachas in the Gemara about converting for the right reasons, not for ulterior motives. And the Gemara talks about during the time Jews didn't take Gerim during certain times, because when the Jews were on top, of course they're going to join the Jewish people. But if it would have joined by Kriyas Yamsuf, then it wouldn't have made anything. Of course, Kriyas Yamsuf, the Jews are on the top, God's running the show, and the Jewish people are the team, so of course he's going to join. But he had to wait for Machamas Amalek, as the Gemara tells us, Asher Karcha Baderach, Amalek attacked us and they cooled us off, and therefore they tried to take away all the great nisim that happened. So it was only after Kriyas Yamsuf and Machamas Amalek he had the balance, so it doesn't look that he's just going during good times, so therefore he waited for both. And that's what we see the commentators point out. It was a Shas HaKosher, it was a time of opportunity. That Yisro immediately, there wasn't the right time before. He heard Kriyas Yamsuf, he heard other things, but it's not enough to make the right decision. You got to do it at the right time also. Like the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, by Yichad Yisro. What do you mean by Yichad Yisro? So Rashi, the Targum quote, Yichad Simcha. But the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, Daf Samach Daled, Rav writes, he took a charbo, chad that is sharp, he took a sword and he basically circumcised himself. And the Mefarshim talk about the halachic issues of how could, if he wasn't Jewish, how could he circumcise himself? You have to be a bar milah, you have to be Jewish first. The same kasha they asked by Avraham Avinu, how could he gamal himself? They give halachic answers to perhaps ba'an ke'echad, but al pi machshava, al pi drush, they point out that he felt this was the time. There was no one else around. He didn't want to wait any longer, because if he waited any longer, so he might have messed up on the moment. You know, halachically speaking, they go into the issues of what he was doing. What type of milah did he need? Was he b'nei keturah? Was he chayev milah? But al pi machshava, they say he felt now was the time to do it, because as we know, as we see by Pinchas and Zimri, as the Gemara tells us, if Pinchas would have asked the Shaila, so that would have been too late already. He would have lost his man. He would have lost the time to do it. So there are certain times to doing the mitzvah. You have to jump on the opportunity. Like Avram, lech lecha. Like, okay, we have to go right away. You have to go at the time which is appropriate. And as the Orach Chaim HaKodesh points out, when later on when Moshe, in the PARSHA, Moshe went up on the mountain, he went up before God told him. Why didn't he wait for a tzivah? So the Orach Chaim writes he did wait for a tzivah. God already told him at the sneh, when we come to this mountain, I'm going to go up with you. So we see as soon as Moshe got to the mountain, he went up. And that's what the Orach Chaim and others point out. Actually, Rav Tzadok HaKohen points out, when it says the Jewish people left the chipazon, they left in waste quickly because that was the mitzvah. They had the whole issue with the matzah. However, even though, as we see, there's a Shas HaKosher, it's a time, it's a moment to do mitzvahs, but like everything in life, you need a balance. Like if the Jews wouldn't have left right away, they would have been stuck in Mitzrayim forever, perhaps, as we say, in the Haggadah. However, once they leave, so at a certain point, you got to take a step backwards, or a moment of silence. You need to do some mitzvot. You got to think where you're going in life, and therefore that you have to do in its proper time. Like it was the 49 stages. It was a whole process. It wasn't like Matan Torah happened overnight. They left. They ran out of Mitzrayim right away because that was the time to leave. But it was each day at a time. They worked on a midah. They were in the 49th levels of Tumah they had to work on. That takes time. So that's what we see from the beginning of the parasha here. Ma shmua shama uba. What caused them to come and leave? Kriyas Yamsuf u'machamas Amalek. It wasn't enough just to Kriyas Yamsuf, else it would just be jumping on the bandwagon. However, it was Machamas Amalek. It doesn't look like it was just going in only because everything is going well. And that's the Yikr. Obviously everyone heard it. Why only is it Yisro Mashmu Shama? All the nations of the world heard. But Yitro was the only one who was able to dihir, as they say in Yiddish. There's listening and there's hearing. A person his ears could actually hear something, but in halacha, in Hebrew, in Lashon HaKodesh, Vayishma means not only hear, but you dihir, you internalize it, and it changes you. That's why many people could read the warning from the Surgeon General about cigarette smoking. How come some stop, some make a joke about it, yeah, well, I'm not going to die healthy, or etc. But one person visualizes them sitting on the hospital bed with lung cancer, and whenever the light bulb goes up and they hear it. So to hear something, you need the koach hashemiya, and that's what Yitro had. And that's how the Mefarshim explain the apparent contradiction we have regarding the Ben Soreh Moreh, that it says that we kill him al shem sofo, not only what he's doing now, what he's going to do. Because at the end of the day, he'll be a drug addict, he'll become a murderer, etc. Yet we know the famous Chazal by Avram, by Yishmael, by Hagar, Basher Husham. And Rashi quotes the Chazal, Basher Husham, that, what do you mean? Right now Yishmael is a tzaddik, he did tshuva. I can't punish Yishmael now with what his descendants are going to do later. Basher Husham. So we have an apparent contradiction, but by Yishmael, he wasn't willing to punish what could happen in the future, but by Ben Soreh Moreh he is. So there are many answers. One is that Ben Soreh Moreh, that's in the Nevuah already. So normally Basher Husham is the rule, but Ben Soreh Moreh is the exception. And some point out, the Mizrahi, that the Ben Soreh Moreh didn't even begin to turn around. He's doing evil full force. By Yishmael, he already started doing tshuva. However, the answer we're looking for, I think it's from Rav Goldberg, the former the Rosh Hashiva in Kerem B'Yavneh, that he explains no, is because the problem with the Ben Soreh Moreh is he lost the kolach hashmiya. That he's no longer listening. He's not listening to his parents. He's not listening to the elders. He's not listening to the chachamim. and everything's just going right off them. So if you have no koach hashmiya, then it's over. If you don't have the ability to hear and internalize and change, so there's no more hope for you. Yishmael, from the name, from Shemiah, that Yishmael he did tshuva, he was able to hear and do tshuva, but the Ben Torah Mori did not have the koach hashmiya. And that was the greatness of Yitro. Everyone heard about Kriyas Yamsef HaMachamas HaMalek. Everyone heard the words, but Yitro was the only one to actually hear about Yishma Yitro, and he was able to internalize the message and do tshuva and join, in his case, join the Jewish people. We'll be reading Parshas Yitro this coming Shabbos, and the Aseret HaDibros is in Parshas Yitro as well as Parshas Veschanan. Popularly called the Ten Commandments, albeit in Hebrew it's never called the Ten Commandments, it's the 10 statements, the 10 principles. As Rav Sajagon points out, 6 plus 1 plus 3 equal 10. The 613 commandments equal the Aseret HaDibros. And Rav Sajagon has a sefer where he shows if you go down deep enough you can find every mitzvah in the Aseret HaDibros. Like where do you find Pesach? So Zoch Hashem HaShabbos L'Kodsho, like the mitzvah of sanctifying time. So that's the whole concept. Where do you find not to embarrass someone publicly? Lo Sirtzach. I'm sure some are more, some might be more of a push, others are more a natural fit, but I haven't seen the sefer, but I hear within the sefer he finds the 613 mitzvahs. So we know the Aseret HaDibros are split into the two tablets. Why 2 tablets? Why not 10? So as the old joke goes, we'll do the joke first and the real pshat. Then they came down to when God came down to all the nations of the world. Well, this part is true. It's a medrash, and they said, "Do you want the Torah?" They said, "What's in it?" So he said, "Depends. Different versions of different nations, but one nation lo sirtzach, not to murder. It's not for me. Al charbel, I live on the sword." Not to commit adultery, sorry, I'm out. And you go through the different nations. And he got to the Jews, they asked how much. He said free, they said we'll take 2. That's how the joke goes. Why there are 2 tablets. But the real pshat, the Gemara tells us in Kedushin, because there are 2 basic categories of commandments in Judaism. There are actually 3, but for our purpose we'll stick to 2. Ben Adam Lamakom and Ben Adam L'Chaver. The first 5 are commandments between man and God. The second 5, Ben Adam L'Chavero. And at first glance, Kivrei Avim seems to be on the wrong side of the tablets. And so why is it the 5th? So that's what Chazal tell us. The real Kivrei Avim is a unique mitzvah. It's both a mitzvah Ben Adam L'Makom and a mitzvah Ben Adam L'Chavero, because the Gemara tells us in Kedushin there are 3. We all have 3 creators: Mommy, Daddy, and God. Not necessarily in that order. We all have 3 creators. So therefore, if you put it, the first 5 are commandments to our creators. So then, Kivrei Avim, they created me. On the other hand, kids are people too, parents are people too. So therefore, it's a perfect transition from Ben Adam L'Makom to Ben Adam L'Chavero. And therefore, that's why it's there. So those are the two. Those are the two sides of the tablets. Which one takes precedence? Is one category more important than the other? Are Ben Adam L'Makom more important than Ben Adam L'Chavero? Or is Ben Adam L'Chavero more important than L'Makom? So, even though we know we have the 10 Commandments and we have an order, and I remember many years ago, I think it was Larry King Live, not that I really watched him too much, but let's say at night, switching some channels, it turned on, I think it was Dr. Laura at the time. She was making the rounds. That's what people do when they put out a movie, so they want to get on the talk shows to get some interest on the book. So I think her book was the 10 Commandments. So I don't know what she answered, but I remember his question. He asked, so tell me, which is the most important commandment? And whatever she said. I don't know what she said, I'll tell you what Chazal say. So that's why in the beginning of that Aseret HaDibros, it says Vayidaber, it says Leimor, and Rashi quotes that it was all done in one utterance, that it was impossible even for human beings to comprehend. So why bother saying something we can't understand? So the first step is we wanted to show, for humans, you have to accept one commandment before the other, but don't think one's more important than the other. They're all equal, and now I have to put them in order. So obviously in different areas, so we find in different ways, Ben Adam Chavero will take precedence. So clearly, in extreme cases, all depends on, it depends on which mitzvahs we're talking about. But let's say someone is drowning in a pool and a person's in the middle of davening. So clearly, the Gemara says you're a chassid shota, you're a pious fool, that God could wait. You could wait. So it's a general rule because human needs are right away, and God usually could wait. So if there's a pressing need between a B'Adam Chaveiro and B'Adam Makam, so obviously God, God wants you to do the B'Adam Chaveiro. So really, in essence, you're getting +2 because you're doing God's will and you're doing a B'Adam Chaveiro. And that's why we find many Gemaras that Chazal talk about when the Kohen Gadol, even on his way to do the Avodah on Yom Kippur, if on his way he finds a Meis Mitzvah, he has to go ahead and bury it because Kavod Abrios, because we see B'Adam Chaveros take precedence. So again, so it depends when, but since B'Adam Chavero take precedent, so therefore you wanted to put B'Adam L'Makom first, because one might think you don't want to come to the mistaken conception that B'Adam Chavero is more important. So since many times it takes precedence, we had to put B'Adam L'Makom first to show they're equally as important. Again, the challenge are for different people. Some people, the challenge is to looking, because some people look, when they look at religion, they just see the B'Adam L'Makom, and for others, they just see the B'Adam L'Chavero. So everyone has their own challenge that they have to look equally. To be an observant Jew, you have to be meticulous in both sides of the tablets. And even though we find, when it comes to Onshin, that B'Adam L'Makom seems to have much stronger penalties, like Shabbos, Avodah Zarah, and by B'Adam L'Chavero, we don't find, barring Ritzicha, we don't really find Onshin in the Torah. So that's what the Meshach Chochmah explained in Parshas Beshalach, that there's a fundamental difference between the Yachid and the Tzibor. When you're talking with the Yachid, so then B'Adam L'Makom, that we go by the strong penalties. But when you're dealing with the Tzibor, zero tolerance when there's no B'Adam L'Chavero on a communal level, then God has no patience. Meshach Chochmah gives 4 examples. We'll go through them quickly in terms of how he proves his point. Different Chazals. The Chazal tell us that even though in the Dor Shel David they were tzaddikim and they were big Talmidei Chachamim, yet they fell in battle. But the Dor Shel Achav, even though they were over there Avodah Zarah, they were matzliach in battle. So the Medrash says because the Dor of David they didn't get along with one another, but in the Dor of Achav they did. So not that you don't have to do tshuva on Avodah Zarah, but God has patience, gives you more time. But when the communal Jewish people are not acting properly, that's zero tolerance. The punishment comes right away. Or another example the Meshach Chochmah gives is the difference between Bayis Sheni and Bayis Rishon. Bayis Rishon was destroyed for the big 3, for the cardinal sins. The Bayis Sheni was destroyed for sinas chinam, unwarranted hatred. Which one's worse? Well, let's go look. It only took them 70 years to start rebuilding the second Beis HaMikdash. God already forgave them, but we're still waiting on the Bayis Shlishi. In other words, we still haven't been forgiven yet for the sin of sinas chinam, obviously because it's still around. We haven't rectified the sin, as Rav Kook likes saying, if the sin of destruction was sinas chinam, we have to go to the opposite extreme and do avas chinam. And the third example the Meshach Chochmah gives is in terms of the Dor HaMabul, and I only had verses to Dor HaFlaga. And the Dor HaMabul, they were involved in many great sins, but what was the final decree? Well, Nichtam El HaGzela. It was the bottom line on Gzela, that's the thing that did them in. So again, the things you haven't, the Aleph base, everyone knows the basics of stealing. That's what we say in the Elad Yom Kippur. We're still worried about Gizela. So, as opposed to the Dor HaFlaga, what was there? He laughed at him. You want to shoot missiles at me? He doesn't really take it seriously. Of course, you have to do tshuva, but when there's a communal violation of Adam Chavero, to then watch out. And the fourth example the Meshech Chochmah gives is, he points out that the difference is there are many mistakes in the Midbar, but two major sins the Jews were punished for: the Chet HaEgel and their Chet HaMeraglim. So the Chet HaEgel was Avodah Zarah, or appeared Avodah Zarah, and bottom line, Moshe came down and he finally got forgiveness.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
But the Meraglim, what was the sin? Lashon Hara, even though it was Lashon Hara on Eretz Yisrael, not on a person, but the whole concept of Lashon Hara, which is the epitome of Adam Chavero, and not only that, but they were a kafei tova. They were a bunch of ingrates. They didn't appreciate everything that God did for them, and therefore we see on Adam Chavero on a communal level that the punishment is swift. They couldn't even enter the land of Israel. So that's what the Meshech Chochmah points out, that we see, even though in terms of onshin, from one-on-one, it's much stricter, or the way it looks in the Torah, B'Adam L'Makom, but when it comes to a communal level, it's B'Adam L'Chavero is the more serious one. And that's so just to summarize, we discussed Aseret HaDibros, the two sides of the tablets, B'Adam L'Makom L'Chavero, and the Kibbud Avayim is a natural transition. As the Minchas Chinuch writes, it's a mitzvah B'Adam L'Makom L'Chavero, and many times B'Adam L'Chavero takes precedence because Pikuach Nefesh, the Kohen Gadol, because Kavod HaMeis, Kavod HaChai, but not to think that it's more important. So you balance the playing field. God put the B'Adam L'Makom first, and in order to balance that out. And as the Meshech Chochmah pointed out, with our communal level, B'Adam L'Chaveros are treated much more severely. And just to conclude, and what is the first letter of the Aseret HaDibros is Anochi. And what's the last letter? Is Reyecha. So that's what the Mefarshim point out, that if you care about Reyecha, in order to have B'Adam L'Chavero, you need B'Adam L'Makom. That's why it has to start off with the first five at Adam L'Makom and Adam L'Chavero, because we don't have to look too far to Nazi Germany. As Rav Soloveitchik used to say, the same professors who are giving these tremendous courses on ethics and etiquette, they would just, when the political climate changed, they were giving the same drushes on why the finest solution is ethical. If it's man-made, so anything is possible. As we see, it's the Malbim right by Avram Avinu, when he had to tell them that Sarah was his sister. They said, "Like, why are you telling me? Well, we're not third country countries. We're on the top of the line." So he says, "Rak ein yeras Hashem b'makam hazeh." If there's not yeras Hashem in this place, then yechoshesh for ritzipus, and that's the yisod of the Aseret HaDibros. It has to be first Anochi. Only once you establish a God-based morality, then Reyecha, then people are safe, because even though right now logic might dictate not to murder, but okay, so what's murder? Maybe abortion's okay, maybe killing the sick is okay, maybe euthanasia is okay, all those things. That's why the Torah specifically begins, the first yisod, even B'Adam L'Chavero has to be based on the B'Adam L'Makom, and then once you have the God-based morality, then the B'Adam L'Chavero will continue.